Well, we're going to try to give you what it is, where it is, how it worked, and what makes it important. And we're going to try to do that rather quickly. So we're going to roll through, and Bob and I are going to try to do things in tandem. I'm going to do some slides, he's going to do some slides, and we're going to try to move it along. Okay, whoops. All right, the Morris Canal, just the facts. 102 miles long, starts in Phillipsburg on the Delaware River, and extends 102 miles all the way across the state to Jersey City, on the harbor in New York. One of the interesting things about it is it's a wonderful straight line route from coal mines to markets, but it's going up and over the highlands. So it was a real challenge to build, and as we'll see, part of the concept is that it was also going to greatly affect the central of New Jersey. You can see from the cross section at the bottom of the page, the challenge was that it had to go uphill all the way to Lake Apacon. Lake Apacon is one of those things that we all know about, but not many of us know that it's actually a canal reservoir. And that's what makes it possible for this canal to exist. All that water way up there in the highlands, tapped off in both directions, filling up this canal, making it possible for boats to go all the way across the state. But the boats have got to climb uphill all the way to Lake Apacon, and then downhill all the way to the harbor, or vice versa, depending on their cargo. And that's almost 1,700 feet of elevation change. And not exactly a great idea. Canals are not supposed to climb mountains, but this one did. And they had to accomplish that. And part of the story of this canal is how they did that. Let's get it carried. Bob?
Can you all hear me without the microphone? Okay, I wanted to talk about why the Morris Canal was built. Would you believe in the 1830s we had a fuel crisis? There's a fuel crisis now. Back in the 1830s, because of the iron industry in northern Morris County, all the trees were cut down. Fortunately, we found anthracite coal in northeastern Pennsylvania up here, but they had to figure out a way of getting it to northern Morris County, as well as the New York and the Philadelphia market. So there were 7 canals that were created because of that. You have the Lehigh navigation coming down to Easton. You have the Morris Canal going up through the highlands, a mountain climbing canal. You had the Delaware Division going down all the way to Bristol, or later on you could cut across at New Hope to Lambertville to enter the D&R Canal, which goes across the waste of New Jersey. You have the Schuylkill Canal coming down to Philadelphia, and the Delaware and Hudson Canal, which came down from Holmesdale, went past Port Jervis, all the way up to Kingston, New York, and that was on tide water on the Hudson River, then coming down to the New York market. So we were just one of these many canals, and on these canals, the vessels were called boats, not like the Erie Canal where they called them barges.
Okay, so from what Bob says, you can. This is all about money. Money's always popular. They got all this coal, and gee, it's no good sitting in mines in Pennsylvania. You have to be able to sell it to somebody. So everybody was building canals, and one of the important markets, of course, was the New York market. We got a wonderful picture of some people unloading tons of coal in Newark, but this guy up here, this George McCullough, he had an idea that we needed a canal here in New Jersey, and part of that was because here in Morris County, we don't think of ourselves as an industrial county, but in the early 1900s, New Jersey was a mining and iron making state, and especially up here in northern New Jersey. And how are you going to make that work? How are those guys going to make that work? Competing in a world market without a transportation system. Mr. McCullough was an incredible promoter, and he saw that not only that the farmers and iron miners and manufacturers here in Morris County needed a transportation system, and gee, if we could be transporting coal one direction, and we can be and transporting iron ore and finished iron products in another direction, we could make a lot of money. It's always about money. This is a picture of Jefferson Township, and all those dots on there are iron mining or iron making establishments. It's still our most rustic township, and all that industrial activity was going on up there. And there was so much activity, they actually built a railroad. The Ogden Mine Railroad is the red line, and it leads down to Lake Apacong. And iron ore was put onto canal boats and towed across the lake and put into the canal and sent westward to the Lehigh Valley. So this was an incredible economic engine that needed a transportation system to make it work. This handsome dude up here is a hammerman. He's got his tongs there and his leather apron, and he's looking very dapper. I always love that picture. That's why it's in there. Tell us about some canal boat. Here we go.
Morris Canal is a mountain climbing canal, 102 miles long from Phillipsburg to Jersey City. It climbed over 1,674 feet of elevation change. Because of that, we had special boats on the Morris Canal. In the later years, they actually would separate the boats. We called them section boats. There would be a hinge there and a pin. They'd pull the pin, and you had basically two separate boats. They needed to do that to go over the inclined planes, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. Joe will talk about that. Also, it facilitated turning the boats around. The boats are 90 feet long. It's 11 feet wide. They just fit in one of the locks. But going over the inclined plane, they had to bend, or they had to brake. So what we did is we had that pin there so it could be pulled. Notice the motive power of the vessel. Mules, 2 mules. The boat could carry maybe 70 tons of cargo, mostly coal. And because of that, they only needed 2 mules to move them along. If you've ever messed around with boats, you know just leaning into a boat with a tow line, you can get them moving on the water. Very little friction. One of the reasons the Morris Canal was so successful over the road was because there was very little friction and little energy needed to move boats along.
You're going to talk about locks.
Lock. We talked about the inclined plane. The lock is an old invention. Did it come from China? It may have back in the 6th century. Did it come from Egypt? Maybe even before that. It was a standard operating facility to raise and lower boats. It was like a bathtub with doors at both ends. A boat would come up to, let's say a boat was coming downstream, the lock is filled, this drop gate would be dropped down so the boat would float over it, the boat would come into the chamber, we'd raise the gate, now the chamber and the water is trapped in here with the boat. In the miter gates on the downstream end there are little valves that could be opened, and that would let the water out of the chamber. As the water was let out, the boat with the water would of course descend. Once it got to the same level as the next level of canal, you could open the miter gates and the boat would be on its way. Very simple technology, been around a long time. It would not have been practical on the Morris Canal. They figured they would have needed maybe 300 or 400 locks just to get up and down. Plus, these are great water users. Every time you go through a lock, the water you bring with you, you don't have that in them. You have to get more water from the upper plane, from the reservoir at the top. This is a nice shot of Wharton. This lock, actually, you can go there today and almost see the stones in the same position. This is the lock tender's house over here. The locks and the planes would operate basically from sun up to about 8 or 9 o'clock at night.
Okay, as Bob said, this lock is being restored right now, and you can actually go and visit that. Locks are actually rather expensive to build, and as Bob said, you know, we never could have accomplished this canal with old technology. So they had to develop something new to accomplish all that mountain climbing that this canal had to do. So they looked around and they discovered that some people in England had been trying to solve the same problems, and they learned from what they were doing over there, but they kind of upped the ante and they built inclined planes that could not just, you know, carry a couple of tons of cargo downhill, but carry up to 20 tons both up and down. And so this is an illustration from Plane 9 west out in Warren County, but it illustrates that these were huge water-powered machines. If I told you I was going to take you on a tour and I was going to show you a huge water-power machine that was a couple of 100 feet long and could lift boats with 70 tons of cargo, and it was built in the 1830s, you would think, what is he nuts? But there were 22 of these, and they were all across New Jersey, lifting and lowering boats. And many of these sites exist today, and there are several in Morris County, some of the best ones. Now, the Warren County people are going to yell at me, but I think that we have the best remains. Anyway, Very efficient. You're taking water from the upper level of the canal and you're taking it to a powerhouse. You're dropping it down into a huge water-powered rotary turbine, and you're using that to provide the oomph, the power to raise and lower boats up an incline. I think the next slide, I've got a cross-section here. That's the plane in Rockaway. There's a cross-section view of one of those turbines, a huge machine. These were so powerful that they could take a fully loaded boat with 70 tons of cargo. I think it's about 125 tons altogether, boat, cargo, and cradle car, and move it from a dead stop up an incline and put it into an upper level of the car, of the canal. So this is the sexy technology that makes, one of the things that makes this canal really interesting and brings people out to see what's going on.
This technology was so successful that we had people coming around the world to study it. Japan, they duplicated 2 incline planes in Tokyo. Canada, they duplicated in Nova Scotia, they have 2 incline planes, or they had, and in Big Chute on the Trans-Severn Canal in Canada, they used technology. But the best one, if you had a chance to look at the video I had in the back, was in Poland, where they recreated 5 incline planes. In the 1860s, dignitaries would come from these other countries, they'd look at the technology of the Mars Canal incline plane, and they would copy it. In Poland specifically, they improved on it. Our cable, as you can see back there, is about 2 1/4 inches in diameter. Their cable was like 3/4 of that because they were able to reduce the amount of weight of the cradle car and the other items. So this is a world-renowned, a world-famous Mars Canal.
Bob has the video back on the table there. Please look at that when you get a chance. And there's some artifacts on the table, including a piece of the cable, which is really pretty cool to imagine that this huge piece of wire rope could actually, work to accomplish the mechanical needs of this incline plane. These wonderful pictures are also, there's hundreds of pictures of the Mars Canal, and of course, we history people just love them. There's a whole pile of handouts on the back counter there, a handout that we made for a recent tour that we did. Please take them away, enjoy them. Don't make us take them home.
Canal runs on water, and any canal has a summit level at one point or another. Our summit level was Lake Pacon. George McCullough was fishing on Lake Pacon, or Great Pond at that point, and he thought, geez, if I could divert the water down the Musconetcong Valley, through the Rockaway Valley and Passaic Valley, I could use that as a supply of water for the Mars Canal. And that's what they did. He got a charter from the state, they got a committee going first, got a charter from the state in 1824. They started building the canal in 1825, and in 1831, the first boat, I think it was November 6th, went from Phillipsburg all the way to north. By 1836, it was extended to Jersey City, tidewater, right across from New York City. The other reservoirs.
Whoops, I jumped.
The other
There we go.
reservoirs.
Sorry.
When we enlarged, Mars Canal was enlarged 3 times. The 3rd time they needed more water because you have evaporation. Every time you go through a lock, you lose that water. So they had to create the Pompton feeder. They actually threw a dam across the Pompton River. Actually goes all the way up to Greenwood Lake. These lakes, by the way, Greenwood, Lake Pacon, Lake Cranberry Lake, Bear Pond, Saxon Lake, they are all now state parks. Because the Mars Canal Banking Company, when it was abandoned, reverted back to the state of New Jersey. So they're all our state parks right now. So water sources coming from northern New Jersey. Next slide.
Okay, Pompton Feeder.
I mentioned the Pompton feeder. It's right now it's a water conduit. It is basically off limits, but there's no one there to throw you off of it.
Don't tell anybody. Don't tell anybody.
In the future, we'll allow to walk that. It's about 6 miles long, a little longer. They actually dammed up the Pompton River to give a body of water so they could actually feed the canal, and it went both directions. It went towards north mainly, but it went back up somewhat. This is the inlet lock at the dam on the Pompton River for the top of the feeder, and that still exists, not with the gates, but the stonework is still there. A bad note to tell you about here, we know a lot about this. The good news is we know a lot about this lock because it was excavated archaeologically about 10 years ago because of that flood tunnel you may have heard about. Unfortunately, that flood tunnel is coming back and rearing its head again, so we're hoping it doesn't happen because it's going to be right on the site
We're hoping to be able to get permission to walk on this feeder. The whole length of the feeder is pretty much in perfect condition. It's being used for a water pipeline, as Bob said, and it is very walkable. It's only a matter of forming an agreement to have the public use that. One of the most compelling things about this story is that it is not just about a canal. It's about people, and it's about places that we all know, especially here in Morris County, where the local communities had so much invested in the canal that they were all, all the towns listed there were wannabe industrial towns. They very much had a lot invested in mining and iron manufacturing, and what they needed was to be able to sell their products, to transport them to viable markets, and the canal offered them that opportunity. The view here is the basin in Rockaway, and you see a canal boat loading coal at the foundry, and the picture there is a close-up of a fellow unloading a canal boat. A great example is the town of Boonton. The town of Boonton that we know today didn't exist before the Morris Canal came through. There's the town of Old Boonton that is now under the Boonton Reservoir. Boonton, as we know it, grew as a company town to support the New Jersey Iron Company, and it was a cooperative real estate deal between the fellows who were building what was at that time a cutting-edge iron producing agency and the Morris Canal people, and it became a huge industrial site that employed thousands of people, well, hundreds of people. Rockaway is another wonderful example. The town just wraps right around the canal. This is the basin that's now a park, the main street with loading docks, the foundry in the foreground. This was an integral part of the community. The community was a small village before the canal gave it the impetus to grow into an industrial town. And of course, you'll hear more about Wharton, formerly Port Wareham, that incredibly embraces their canal history. This is their borough seal, which totally, is dedicated to their canal history and their wonderful park at U-Force with this wonderful stretch of canal that John Manna will talk to you about in a few minutes. And Bob, talk about the Western Division.
Warren County. Thank goodness Warren County got us started on this greenway 25 years ago, maybe longer. Really have to attribute it to Jim Lee. Jim Lee lived in Plane 9 West. He excavated the chamber of the inclined plane. He lived in the plane tender's house with his wife Mary and the family that grew up on there. And he was probably the most important person to preserve the history of the Morris Canal. And he'd be yelling at us right now saying, Bob, you're not talking about the people. You're not talking about the community of the canal. Joe and I were tasked to tell you the history of the Morris Canal in 20 minutes. We've been studying it for 40 years. Please come see us and get more history. There's much more about it in the panels and everything. But Warren County really started out with the greenway concept. They got some ordinances in place where they review property around the canal. They have Plane 9 West, which is a wonderful tourist attraction. Back in 2006, the World Canal Conference, which was being held in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, I brought them over to Jim Lee's plane, and they were all blown out of their socks. We had about 100 people from all over the world, maybe 8 countries were represented, and they really enjoyed seeing the inclined plane. They also went to Lock 7 West, which has a museum there, and now a replica of a canal boat. I recommend you all get out there to see what it's about. So Warren County really has been the leader in this greenway project.
Okay, we really have to wrap up here. There's little value to history unless we learn something from it. And the Morris Canal has a wonderful story that invites us to look back. And the world that we see today has everything to do with the cheap energy, the abundant transportation, and the accumulation of wealth that we all enjoy in the world we live in now. And this is all part of the story of this canal, and it's a very compelling story that I hope that we've been able to at least touch upon. Thank you.